All right, so as we keep talking about fungi here, I really want to stress the ecological value of these things, of these organisms. There's always an economic value, but ecological is really going to be important for us as biologists to understand because often people only focus on the economic and they ignore the ecological. And in many, many cases, the ecological will actually outweigh the economic. We'll talk more about this with conservation biology, but it's definitely something. Keep that in the back of your head. What is the ecological value? Or we could use the term niche. What is the ecological role of an organism? Okay, other things to mention here about these guys. Lots of fungus play a role in forming these things we call mycorrhizae. So we talked briefly about this in the previous lecture. Mycorrhizae is that mutualistic, mutualistic relationship between fungi, yeah, I thought I spelled it wrong, and plants. Lots of different examples. Let me get the spelling on here. There, mutualistic relationship between fungi and plants. Most of the time it's connected with the root system. Okay, so roots of about 90%, that's huge, huge. 90% of known vascular plants have these mycorrhizae relationships. Now, there are two categories of mycorrhizae relationship. Most of these are done by those arbuscular, the AM fungi we talked about, but two categories of mycorrhizae relationship. One of them is known as an arbuscular. This is the most common type of relationship. A lot of times the glomerulomycetes are going to be involved in this. And what they're going to do is they're going to have the fungal hyphae that actually penetrates inside of the fungal or the plant root system. So we'll call them the that should be one H, endomycorrhizae. Man, my keyboard is not playing nicely here. Okay, endomycorrhizae. So endo, remember endo. Endo means within or inside of. So you notice the fungal hyphae goes through the cell, the outer cells of the plant, and then it punctures or penetrates inside of the cells of the plants. So it's internal, inside the cell. So it's allowed to exchange nutrients. The fungal hyphae grab nutrients from the plants. In exchange, the hyphae is passing minerals and ions and things of that nature to the plants. But that's an internal type of relationship, endomycorrhizae. The other one is known as an ectomycorrhizae. And this is where the fungal hyphae wrap around the root cells. It doesn't actually go inside of it, it wraps around it. The hosts for an ectomycorrhizae relationship include lots of forest trees, things like pines, oaks, I'll just say etc. So the challenge is if you want to restore an oak forest, do you have the right fungal component in the ecosystem there? Because if you don't have the basidiomycetes in that community, it's going to be more difficult for the oak tree to obtain the nutrients it needs because these guys work together. So, and there's that challenge. Oh, I want to grow an oak forest in a community that's never had it. You probably don't have the fungal component in that community, and your oak trees are not going to do well. So lots and lots of examples here. Let's take a look at animals. How do fungi and animals play together? Well, we mentioned before they live in the guts of herbivores. Cows were the example. Breaking down nutrients, digesting nutrients, making them available for the animal. The picture on the right and actually let me give credit to the leafcutter ants that raise fungal gardens. So these leafcutter ants go out and clip leaves, bring them back to the colony, bury them underground. They don't eat the leaves. The leaves get decomposed by the fungus. The fungus then is eaten by the ants. So they're eating fungus, not the leaves. But what's fascinating, and this is where anybody going towards pharmacy should pay attention, the ants bring leaves into the garden, and if the leaf has maybe a pathogenic bacteria on it or a bad fungus, the ants will actually go to different plants, grab different leaves that have antifungal or antibacterial properties to combat the negative fungus or the negative bacteria growing in their colony. So they're pharmacists. They're farmers and they understand pharmacology. Humans can learn a lot from ant fungal relationships here. So some really, really fascinating relationships out there that we want to just try to be more aware of. Now, as parasites and pathogens, yeah, they're big problems. A lot of plant-based diseases, they're ranked as one of the most harmful pests of plants. They can spoil and destroy stored foods. Lots of significant economic issues here associated with fungal pathogens. So one of the largest organisms in the world is actually a fungal pathogen. It's known as armillaria. So these are aerial views of a pine forest, and those circles represent the pathogen that's infecting or decomposing, compromising pine trees. And if you look at the radius of those circles, some of these things are a mile. I believe the largest one was over a mile wide in radius. That's one organism, one pathogen that is infecting all of those trees. That is huge. Here's a second one, a third one. So fungus is, like I said, it's part of our ecosystem. We need to understand it and have a better picture of what it can do. On the negative side, when it comes to food, they can make foods carcinogenic or poisonous. If you get this stuff on corn, don't eat the corn. Not a good thing. It can be very, very dangerous to eat fungally infected corn. And economically, it can have huge consequences to the farm trying to sell corn if you get that fungal pathogen in there. It's thought Peter the Great's army ate infected rye, made everybody, the soldiers and the horses, sick because they ate infected food before they went into one of their big battles. They lost the battle, and it's thought, well, because everybody's sick, you're not going to fight real well. That was the problem why they lost the battle, thus changing the course of history with his army. Not that I'd encourage it, but on the hallucinogenic side, fungal derivatives can create or cause hallucinogenic properties based on how much of it is consumed. So things not to play around with though. Too much kills you. So here's a better picture of what it looks like on corn. It's called smut. So you get these green things growing. So, and here's the tough part. That fungus grows, it releases spores back into the farm field. How do you get rid of it? These are maple leaves. If you guys have a maple tree in your yard and you see these little black spots, it almost looks like tar or magic marker. That's a fungal infection. We don't grow a lot of rye here, but if you see a field of rye and it's got those little black spots, those are known as ergots, fungal infection. So economically, fungus can have a huge impact upon the agricultural industry. So let's circle back to the earlier group, tritiomycetes, tritiomycota, or a disease known as tritiomycosis. So this is a fungal disease. Caused by the tritids. As I mentioned in the previous earlier lecture, it's a major factor in the worldwide decline of amphibians. So what this stuff does is it parasitizes the skin of the frog, and it will actually attack the skin, decompose the skin, but what it does is it causes the skin to harden, and now the frog cannot exchange gases through its skin, because remember, amphibians breathe through their skin and lungs. Lungs alone aren't going to do it. So they use their skin for a form of respiration. That's why they tend to need to be moist all the time. And the skin hardens and it kind of calluses up. So that means you can't exchange gas, you can't exchange ions. And unfortunately what happens is these poor little guys, because the ion imbalance becomes so bad, they have a heart attack. So all these little frogs have heart attacks when they've been infected with this tritid or tritiomycosis. Huge problem globally. We can see when an infection starts in a community, it literally moves downstream because the frogs are swimming or the tritids are swimming, they're in the aquatic system, and it just spreads. And you can see communities of frogs just getting wiped out as the infection continues to spread. So, in animals, we often use the term mycosis to refer to a fungal infection in an animal. So if anybody has ever had ringworm or an athlete's foot, we'd say you have a mycosis. So your physician would say, oh, you got a mycosis. Well, let's get you an antifungal and get rid of that. So ringworm is not a worm. It just forms this circular pattern because of the fungal hyphae. Again, it's not a worm. So there's a lot of mislabeling when we talk about things and misassociation with things in science. So the goal is to understand it better, to truly understand what we're working with. So, all right, so let's end this on a high note. Let's talk about the practical uses of fungi, or better yet, let's talk about the financial uses for fungi. How can we use these and make money? Well, let's start with antibiotics. Penicillin, it's produced by fungus. How many other fungi out there can help us medically? So huge economic value to keeping fungi around and understanding which fungi we can use to get rid of bacterial infections. Fermentation. Now, fermentation can be done to produce things like alcohol, beer, wine, etc., but also biofuels. If we're going to create biofuels, we need something that can break down the cellulose and make the cellulose available for fermentation. You got to break it down to glucose and then ferment it. So fungi have the enzymes that enable us to do that. So ethanol. Guys are driving vehicles where you're using ethanol in the gasoline. When you go to the gas station, 10% or whatever ethanol blend, how do you think that ethanol was produced? It's a biofuel. And then bioremediation. Another big value fungi can play to, or fungi play for humans. Bioremediation, cleaning up polluted environments, getting rid of toxins and pollutants and things like that. Often we use fungi or sometimes bacteria to actually clean up these environments, get rid of the pollutants and get the environment and make it healthier and cleaner and a better environment. Sometimes we have to genetically modify the bacteria and the fungi that we use in bioremediation so that way it consumes oil and different toxins. But a lot of practical uses for fungi. The key with all this is understanding the good ones, the bad ones. How do we minimize the bad ones and maximize the good ones when we're talking about fungi and looking at kingdom fungi and the fungal world?